Gozo, the mystic island of legends and traditions. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the experiences as we take you through our voyage around Gozo's towns, villages and hamlets.
But first, let's stop at the small neighboring island of Comino, where it says that one day a Gozosan fisherman stopped for a break in one of the island's caves. While ceasing, suddenly strong gusts of wind began to blow inside the cave, and soon after, the things inside the little boat started to float in the air for a few moments, and then come down again at exactly the same place as before. As soon as he came to terms with what was going on, he regrouped his oars and sped out of the cave as fast as he could.
First, Gozo stopped at the quiet yet busy hamlet of Gzira, where decades ago Spiro and Mitri were careful dismantling the historic tower when at one point they uncovered a large box hidden in one of the walls. When ready from the day's work, they carried the box with them to Mitri's house. During the night, strange noises were heard, and the parish priest was asked to come over. As soon as he did, the lid of the box continued to open and close, and upon close examination, they realized that there was a skeleton inside.
After being taken as a slave by the Moors, Nardo spent years on a faraway island. His wish was always to return back home in search of his daughter. His request was always refused until he became sick, and finally his master gave him the nod. Once back in Gozo, he started to regain his health, in spite of the fact that he got to know that his wife had passed away. He also crossed over to Melleja in search of his daughter Ursula, until one day, whilst near a water spring in Iceland, a woman carrying a child told Nardo that she was his daughter.
A young man who led a bad life rushed to the local chapel to ask the hermit to visit their house as his father was ill. The hermit replied that he need not do so, as his father was already dead after being struck by lightning. He told him that the real reason why he came along was to steal the chalice. However, this was no longer there, as it had been sold. The hermit advised the young man to ensure that his father's death signaled the start of a new era for him. In fact, he decided to join the hermit in a life of prayer from then on.
From Shaukiya to Sannat were two fishermen from the village where at Shlendi Bay during their routine fishing spear. At one point they retrieved a large box from sea, and upon opening it, they realized that it was full of jewels. They both decided to bury the box in a field in their village and return to sea. However, when fishing, a storm gathered over Shlendi Bay, and both fishermen were lost at sea. It is said that their discovery remains unearthed till this very day, waiting for the lucky person to seek its location.
An old witch was famous all around the island for producing a special ointment that cured people. It was called as a last-ditch attempt to save the governor's daughter from dying. Within 7 days, the young lady staged a great recovery following the old witch's intervention through her drink of life. Yet one day, 4 farmers followed her footsteps down Shlendi Valley, where she stored her magical formula. As soon as 2 of the farmers snatched the medicine from the witch's hands, they slipped and the witch was quick to spell a curse on them.
French Grandmaster Perellos, who was an avid hunter, ventured to Gozo and was welcomed by the locals, who had also prepared gifts for him. Luck was on their side, as they managed quite a good catch of collared doves. Around lunchtime, the whole party resorted to some good food and wine, and the atmosphere around was one of merrymaking. The Grandmaster got drunk, and little did he know that his loyal Turkish servant Ali was on an escape mission, as he rowed out of the harbor and was never to be seen again.
Italian artist Matteo Pretti's servant, John Furley, visited a friend's house in Fontana on a Saturday evening. He got very drunk and went out in the streets and started screaming, whistling and shouting absurdities against the knights and how they treated Turkish slaves. Many people came out of their homes to see what all the commotion was about. He was in a very badly drunken state and wouldn't stop embarrassing himself until he finally got arrested and imprisoned. Mattia, as his owner, bailed him out of prison and left back for Malta that same evening.
Gerduf Cave was said to be occupied by the White Lady, who needless to say always wore white, as well as used to tie her hair with a sash of silk. She always walked with her head bent down, and the locals' curiosity was increasing as the days were going by. Against the advice of elder people, a group of youngsters decided to venture inside the cave, following some noises they heard from inside. However, upon doing so, the noises started being heard coming from outside the cave, signifying that the White Lady had moved out of the cave in mystic fashion.
Following a routine attack by the Saracens on Gozo, where, as was typical, they ransacked and stole everything they found in houses, farms, and fields, a group of farmers managed to get hold of Abdul, the leader of the Saracens. He was thus unable to return to his vessel, and in fact, it set sail without him. Abdul was left in torture without food and water, until one day he managed to dig a hole that supplied him with water. However, he drank so much of it that his stomach burst, and he died instantly.
After a Spanish sailor recounted the dream he had had, a violent storm, probably a seaquake, rode the boat he was on. The sailors were very afraid, and the captain started praying, asking for help of the Madonna. He ordered the crew to abandon ship, get on the lifeboats, and head for the coast. Once on land, they kept on walking inland towards that big hill. At the top of the hill, they found a white rose like in the Spaniard's dream. The captain kept his promise and paid the expenses to build a church there. By time, the church was ruined.
After leading a hard life, in her late days, Mary became a fervent follower of Holy Mary. However, due to her limitations, she could not offer her gifts as other people did, until one day she noticed that a supply of oil was trickling down through one of the chapel's walls. Mary was in awe and could not believe her eyes. Yet, when the locals got to know about this, they came along in large numbers and started taking the oil. Some also went a step further and started selling it. Much to the dismay of the people, from then on the oil was never to be seen again.
Bouar was a meticulous farmer who specialized in producing melons. His produce was sold immediately, much to the dismay and jealousy of the other farmers, until one day they all decided to group up and make a havoc out of his fields. They went ahead with their plan, and when Bouar realized what they had done, he was very angry and let out a curse. From that day on, the farmers in that area found out that any melons they grew became jealous of any other product grown close by, and would acquire the taste of that fruit of the tree.
A mother and her 7 daughters moved to a new larger house that they received from the parish priest. After renovating this haunted house, one day they all recounted the dream they had during the previous stormy night. To each other's astonishment, they all had the same dream, and when the parish priest was told about this, he asked them to form any sign they saw with a piece of dough he provided them with. All 7 pieces had the letter M in clear reference to Our Lady. This happening gave birth to the Gzira, a traditional biscuit blessed in September to protect villagers against any damage.
A famous priest, Saint Benedict Joseph Labre, visited the house of a family in central Rabat after being invited by a poor woman who had 5 children and whose daughter was about to get married. Yet the parents simply could not afford to give their daughter a dowry to get with her to her new home. The priest was served soup twice and then left the house after thanking the woman. The poor chap had the biggest surprise of her life when she cleared the priest's plate, as she found 2 large pieces of gold and 2 smaller ones of silver.
A sailor visited the local church while his colleagues remained on board a vessel berthed at the harbor of Marsalfort. The sailor pretended to be a devout follower only to steal an altar runner and run away with it back to the vessel. When the same vessel was ready to set sail, it couldn't, and the captain asked what could have gone wrong. The sailor was quick to admit his misdemeanor and was ordered to return the stolen altar runner at once. Indeed he did, and when he returned on board, the boat set sail to its destination.
On his way to his native Greece, Ulysses' boat was caught in a storm, and hence sought shelter in Gozo, where he met Calypso, who invited him over to the cave where she lived. After recounting his story to Calypso, the young lady became jealous and did not want him to return near his wife and child. It was only 7 years later that Hermes, a messenger sent by the god Jove, ordered Calypso to allow Ulysses to return to his home. Calypso could not go against the god's will and provided the Greek with a ship as well as gifts for his wife and son.
On their way back from visiting the groom's house in Rabat for the traditional Santa Maria feast in midsummer, the bride and her mother and sister were very thirsty, mainly due to the high temperature as well as because they had fed themselves on quite a quantity of nougat. The bride decided to leap over a wall to pluck an apple from a field to quench her thirst. However, this move proved to be fatal as the field owner crept out from under a tree and stabbed the bride to death to the utter disbelief of her mother and sister.
During a sudden tempest in September, during the feast of St. Michael the Archangel, a group of Turkish corsairs set foot on Gozo to seek shelter, however quickly changed their mind in spite of the bad weather, as they soon realized that they were not welcome by the locals. One of the Muslim sailors, Salvo, hid and then went on to meet a young lady, Catherine. Salvo lived with the local parish priest and converted to Christianity. He was also baptized and eventually married Catherine. They also had a son who they named Michael to remember the storm of St. Michael.
And with the beautiful, breathtaking views of the island of Camino from Ala, we return to our starting point that led us to such an amazing world of Gozo legends and myths.